This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and I am your host, Sean Dustin. This morning, I have a very special guest. Her name is Madeleine Black. And Madeleine was a TEDx speaker, and that's where I came across her and her story. Her story is not for the, I guess you would say, faint of heart, or I will have to give a trigger warning here. So if anybody out there is triggered by some of the content that's going to be talked about in this episode, feel free to take a moment, pull away from it if you have to, and get some self-care there. Some of these images that might be put in your head from this story could be uncomfortable for some of you, but I believe it's very important to tell this story and let Madeleine speak her truth, because I think this is way more common than we know. So, good morning, Madeleine. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on your show.
No, thanks for coming out. Please tell me about your story and the TEDx talk. That was a very, very, very compelling and moving speech that you gave for that TED Talk. So, how did that come to be, and just kind of run me through that if you could.
Well, it was always on my list of things I'd like to do, and it was on my second attempt, obviously, that I finally got into Glasgow, which is where I live and considered to be one of the top 10 TEDx's in Europe, which I didn't know. I spoke to an audience of over 2,000 people, which is quite hard to imagine now in these COVID times that we could ever do that again. It was, I have to say, one of the most terrifying moments, but one of the most liberating moments of my life, because my TEDx was called Unbroken, Speaking the Unspeakable. So I have a story that I guess most people keep quiet about and they don't like to share, but I can share it now. So I do. I feel like it's my duty to speak out, really, for all those who can't find their voice yet.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I feel the same way. I mean, I talk about some of my uncomfortable things in my life that I've been through in my story. Just last night, I'm in Toastmasters, and I had to give my icebreaker speech last night, and it revolved around my past and who I am and who I became, and it's really crazy that a lot of people they're amazed at the honesty and just the forthcomingness when you speak your truth like that. It's not normal, I guess, for most people to expose stuff like that about yourself. And the fact that you did and what you talked about, I mean, that is, I was kind of speechless. I had tears at a few points in that. It was just, it's unspeakable what happened. And I have a 3-year-old daughter, so I guess it's really like on the forefront of my mind now because of the times that we're in, and you hear all of these different things now about human trafficking and the amount of children that go missing. It's really scary out there.
It is, but I don't think my story is anything new. I think sexual violence, rape, abuse has been around for many, many years. It's maybe now that we speak about it more, or we have more media coverage so people know about it. And obviously, #MeToo changed a lot. It helped people to find their voice and to speak out as well. So sadly, my story of sexual violence is not uncommon. It is the story of many men, women, and children somewhere every day on this planet would experience what I did.
Yeah, and so for those of you that don't know, I mean, we're kind of dancing around the actual, like, what the TEDx was about, but Madeleine was gang raped at 13 by two males that she didn't know. They came back from a bar. You would lied to your parents, and well, maybe you tell your story.
I did know one of them. One of them was a neighbour of a friend. I lived in London at the time. I'm now in Scotland. They were both Americans. They were sons of diplomats, just living in London for a couple of years. And as you said, my girlfriend and I did what most people did. We lied about to our parents where we were going one night, and we bought alcohol. And I was a skinny little 13-year-old naive girl, never drunk before. And obviously I got drunk really quickly. And two of these men from our table, these young men, took us back to her mum's flat. It was empty because her mum was away. And it just became very clear, really quickly, they weren't there to let me sleep off the alcohol and be good, the Samaritans. They were there for something else. And what proceeded was then 4 to 5 hours of raping me every way they possibly could.
That's horrible, man. And so part of the story that I heard is that when you finally got around to talking about this and you'd left a note on your pillow and your mom had found it, and that was your way of kind of like letting them know what happened, they proceeded to do their own kind of investigation and asked your friend and everything else, and your friend lied about it and said that it never happened.
She said it didn't happen like I said it had happened. She said that they were nice boys and they just brought us home. My dad still wanted to go to the police, but my mum was really quiet. I thought my friend had betrayed me. I couldn't understand. And it took me many, many years to also understand my mum's silence. But long after my dad had died, I'm one of 5 and they were married for nearly 40 years. She told me that as an 8-year-old girl, sorry, Dad, a 3-year-old, you don't want to hear this, but she had also been raped by a neighbor. So when I was confronting her with my story, all of her past was coming up to face her. Her trauma really silenced her because she had never spoken out about it yet. The man who did this to my mom was also raping his daughter. So he was sent to prison. She found her voice. She told her brother, who told my grandparents. And then whilst he was in prison, my mom's family moved house and they never spoke about it again. So in that moment, I thought, my friend has betrayed me, and my mum didn't believe me, but it took me a long time to understand her silence. And I know as well, like many people, so many people keep it hidden because they're ashamed. And I know now the shame was never my shame. The shame was never my mum's shame. 100% of all rapes are caused by rapists, nothing else.
Yeah, that's horrible. I couldn't imagine having to go through that and then, nobody believing you, or that's just crazy. Now, do you think that your friend didn't say what had happened possibly because they were diplomat sons, they were powerful people, or were she friends with them? Because that, to me, I come from the criminal world and the drug world and everything else, and a lot that sounded an awful lot when you explained it, like she may have had something to do with it or was trying to cover up for them because they were friends. I don't know. It just didn't sound, it was like, what?
You know what? I've never known.
Yeah.
I used to drive myself crazy wanting to know. And what's the point? It's not going to change anything. If I get caught in my past, it doesn't lead me right here in my present moment.
Yeah.
So I have stopped trying to work it out and, trying to understand. I used to come up with a few theories, and these are the ones that stick with me. Maybe the same thing happened to her and she blanked it out like I did for many years, or maybe nothing happened to her so she couldn't understand what I was saying. But really, I don't know, and I can't get involved in ideas and theories and conspiracy ideas because I'll never know, and I don't want to do that to my head anymore. It's in a good place.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you've made your peace with it and you're able to talk about it now. You've done the TED Talk, and I'm sure you've got Instagram, Twitter, YouTube channel where you have your own show, which is called actually the same, Unbroken. It's pretty much the same thing, right?
It's called Unbroken, the podcast with Madeleine Black. I just started it literally on the 11th of the 11 minutes past 11 because I might be on the 44. So that way I could get my 44 in.
Yeah, right on. And so tell me a little bit about that. You from what happened to you to the path that you've taken so far. You're a psychologist. You've actually done pretty well for yourself in that. So explain to me a little bit about that, and then your daughter as well that you have, which kind, yeah.
I worked as a psychotherapist for a long time, but I shared my story publicly in 2014, about 6 years ago, with an organization called the Forgiveness Project, because many years later I chose to forgive these two men, to really, for myself, nothing really to do with them, to set myself free. And from there on, it just, opened up so many doors. I was invited to do TV interviews, radio, just to speak all across the world. When I was deciding whether I should stay as a psychotherapist or a speaker, because I was being asked more and more, I said to myself, okay, I'd like a sign. If I'm meant to be a speaker, then I'd love to work internationally. And I thought, well, that will never work. And literally on the 1st of January 2019, I was invited to South Africa. And then on the 5th of January, I was invited to speak in the Maldives, and I was sponsored by UNICEF. And I thought, okay, that's a good sign, and we'll take that sign. Thank you, life. So I put my energy into being a speaker, and I stopped working as a psychotherapist. But obviously, COVID has come along, so my diary is completely emptied, along with most people in the events industry or speaker world. And so I thought, I have had the privilege of meeting incredible people along my journey through the Forgiveness Project. I'm also a recipient in another project called the Global Resilience Project, where Emma Bell has taken 50 of us, she calls us Thrivals, and she's kind of researched what we do and why we thrive. So there's all different stories, and it's fascinating. There's 9 secrets to thriving, and we all do some of them. So I know all these amazing people, and I really believe in the power of sharing stories. There's healing through storytelling. If somebody hears a story at the right time in their life, it can be transformative. So I thought, I have been a guest on many podcast shows, many, and I thought the idea just came to me. I could start my own one, and that's what I've done. So I launched it a month ago. So Friday will be episode 16. I've got 40 in the bank waiting to get published. I've been busy interviewing. I interview people that have had stories, I guess, of overcoming adversity. They've triumphed after tragedy, and they're really stories to heal, to motivate, and to inspire other people. To show everybody really that we're not broken. None of us are broken beyond repair.
People that have gone through some of the hardest stuff in life tend to come out the other side either broken beyond repair or they just thrive, like you're saying, and they don't allow that, they don't allow their, I guess you would say, their situation to be their conclusion.
Yep. Well, I think I've been very lucky. I was born to amazing parents. So what you don't know from the TEDx is that my father was a Holocaust survivor, and he had all his family killed, his parents and brothers and sisters in the Second World War and Auschwitz. And my mum also had her neck broken in an operation and was bedridden for a few years. But both of them, my mum healed herself, and my dad, he loved life. He mucked about. He met my mum, had 5 of us. And he always said that life was for living, and not really what he said to me, but how he lived his life. I saw that, if he can get past having his whole family murdered, surely I can get past one night. And I'm not saying it's easy. This has taken a ton of therapy and a ton of work, and it's a process. It's not a quick overnight fix. It is a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint, to recover from trauma. But I saw, once I had done all the work, it came down to a choice. I could choose to be caught by my past, or I could choose to just break through it and live my life as well as I could. It was kind of like my best revenge, just refusing to be identified by what had happened. So I used to see my dad, he's no longer here, laugh a lot and enjoy life, and I could never understand it. But now I see that was his strength, to go through that, the Holocaust, and to come out laughing and still love life is such a gift.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I always have said, and I've been saying this a lot lately, is that the number one public safety issue should be untreated trauma.
Yeah, I do believe that hurt people hurt people. Through the Forgiveness Project, I've taken part in their program, which they call Restore. And we go into prisons. I've been into Peterborough prison a couple of times, and we work with a group of prisoners. We do on the male side and the female side. And it's really 3 to 4 days of intense personal development with the use of storytelling. And I would say about 90% of the women, I haven't worked with the men yet, have been raped or abused. 90% of them have had trauma, and 95%, pretty much everyone. And then you're going into that hostile environment. It's not going to heal you, It was the stories that we heard were just so shocking, what they had to go through and live through, and then to be in that place, it was just heartbreaking to hear these stories.
Yeah, I've talked to quite a few women in the federal correctional system here, And what I've found is, they were there for drug crimes, but most of them are victims of the men that they're with. And, the men end up getting caught up in all of this stuff. And then the women will go right along with them and end up having to do the time as well. But having been, beaten, abused, all of the things that go along with that kind of a life. And, it is kind of heartbreaking. And it's heartbreaking to know that some of them have gotten 15, 20, 30-year sentences. And their only crime is they got addicted to, methamphetamine. And it was because of, well, maybe not because of, but it was, fostered from the men and drug dealers that they were dealing with. So, yeah, it's definitely a crazy way that life kind of unwinds. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you back a year ago is I think I was remembering when I lived in Las Vegas, and I remember we lived in this I would say we lived in this neighborhood that had parties all the time, right? And so, you'd have people that had swimming pools and the kids are just running back and forth between houses and really no supervision. Their parents aren't around. They may be over at another neighbor's house drinking, and it's like a lot of inappropriate stuff would go on. You would see if a neighbor had gotten drunk, you would see, some weird kind of stuff. And people don't know or kind of understand what causes trauma, and an unwanted gesture or maybe an inappropriate touch from an adult. I mean, all of that can cause a trauma or something PTSD like. And when people think about PTSD, what PTSD is, in my opinion, and it is that trigger that gives you the anxiety of bringing you back to that particular point in time that scarred you to begin with.
And it's re-triggering going through that. So it's re-traumatizing you every time until you finally walk through PTSD. And I lived with it years not even knowing that I had it. But once I realized it made perfect sense why I behaved and responded to lots of things in the way that I did.
So with your own PTSD, and I know that I've done this myself, and when it's not treated, you're actually infecting the people around you and causing them to have the same kind of PTSD that you have. Maybe not in the same way, but you're...
No, I was very good at covering it up. I wore these masks, pretending to be the best mother, the best partner, the best phone maker. But underneath, I was shit scared all the time. I was fearful of everything. And I was very clever at avoiding things. If I went out, I never went in a taxi. I never went on public transport. I always drove, simple things. I wouldn't drink, so I could always drive everyone home. Never went out in the dark. That's easy to avoid. You just get clever. Across the road, if there was a guy walking behind me, people weren't really aware, but I was always on hyper alert. I was always hypersensitive to every situation, checking out a room when I walked in, getting a sense, is it feel safe in here? Does it not feel safe? So it was really around my safety, being out of control and being around men. These were the three things that really, really got me hyper alert.
Makes sense. And that, I totally get that. With me, it was, my anger and everything else that just affected everybody around me, including my dog. My dog, when my octaves start to raise, even now, my dog will bolt, gone, and go hide. Not that I would beat the dog up, but it's just that they would know, uh-oh, here it comes. I better get out of here.
Nobody really likes to sit with someone that's angry. It's like shooting arrows at someone, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah, I guess you're right. It is. But it's, you have to work on things. We don't, just because, you acknowledge that this is, or just because I acknowledge that, oh yeah, I have this issue that I need to work on. If you're not working on it, the issue just stays there, and you just, you're just somebody that talks about working on issues and never really works on them.
And you also have to see what you're doing. So a long time, because I've worked as a psychotherapist for years, a long time people don't see that they're angry, until we really pay attention to what we're doing, only then can we really work it. I'm not angry. I don't know what, it's played back. I'm not angry. So if you go see it, if you're, blinkered or blinded by it, you're not accepting, you're in denial, it's hard. So you really have to wake up to what you're doing.
Yeah, being a person is definitely difficult.
It's a tricky, this thing called human, and yes, humanity being, life is a predicament really, isn't it? It's tricky.
It is, because a lot of the stuff that we've learned, you've got the shadow self, you've got the projection, it's like usually when I run across people that I don't like, it's okay, well, it's not that I don't like them, it's that I don't like what they do that I recognize in myself that I don't like.
Well, there is that, but you could also have good instinct. It could also be your gut telling you to stay away. You could just be feeding off their energy.
Yeah, it's just
your gut. It's not always projection, just to confuse you.
Yeah. But these are things that you have to be aware of. And if you're not aware of them and you don't understand kind of how the mind works and oh, okay, well, let me take a look back at that. And you got to go back to your own like sort of garage and start tinkering with what things are. And am I seeing this in the right way? And, it's just very confusing.
But what's good is you've got a very inquiring mind. So you're asking lots of questions. So never stop asking questions.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I am pretty inquisitive and very curious. I wish more people were curious. Maybe we wouldn't be in a lot of the situations that we are around the world if more people that, were involved in, I guess you would say, empire, like the UK is an empire, the United States is an empire. If you start being more curious about what your countries are doing in the name of your country, maybe we wouldn't have things like that are happening in Syria and all these other places. But that's a different show. And,
it is.
And so,
yeah.
So anyways, let's, one of your big realizations that I got from the TED Talk was when your daughters, when they started becoming the age that you were, when, the trauma happened to you, you really...
We didn't all become the same age at the same time. It was the first one who became 13 first, and that really triggered me. Like I said, I put this mask on. I went to college to do psychotherapy, and I thought I was healed because I thought I wouldn't become a mum. I thought giving birth was going to be like being raped again. But as you know, I have 3 daughters, so I thought that was it. I've healed. I'm good. I went to college, did psychotherapy, tons of personal development, tons of, therapeutic situations where we role-played. And obviously, whatever you hadn't resolved is going to come up. And it really shocked me that these memories returned because I thought I was good. And I'd worked with Women's Aid for 14 years, Rape Crisis for 6 years. I knew about disassociation and numbing and avoidance. But when it happens to yourself, it's very hard to take that on board. So all these memories came back and I thought I'd made it up. I thought it couldn't be that bad. I would remember it really if it was that bad. So I went to therapy and I said, I want you to take these memories away. I don't want to see them anymore. They're rubbish. And he kind of obviously laughed because you can't take memories away. They come up, whether we believe it or not, when we are ready to face them. And I decided that I don't want this hanging over my head for the rest of my life. This is going to be a rain cloud. This bad weather is going to follow me everywhere if I don't deal with it. But that dealing with it took another 3 years because I just was caught in denying. But I realized that was my shame. I thought if anybody knew what had happened to me, they wouldn't want to know me. They would look at me differently. They would be disgusted. They would see me very differently. And that was my fear and my shame speaking to me. And once I really did the very thing that I thought I couldn't do, which was stepping into the shadows, those dark chapters of our lives that we avoid and distract and deny, that's when the real alchemy, that's when the real work happened, because you've got to feel to heal. I had to go into it to really get out of it. And stepping into those most difficult places that I had avoided for years was really what helped me. And I realized actually I didn't forget it. I just didn't want to remember it. It's quite different.
That's a good point, man. Yeah, it's now... fear is false evidence appearing real, and we get caught up in fear quite a bit.
We face everything and rise, and that's what I decided. I've been doing false evidence appearing real, and I thought, no, I'm going to do the other one. fear had been my friend for years. So I didn't know what I was doing. But when I look back now, I did my own kind of exposure therapy. I decided to break up with fear. I didn't want to be friends with fear anymore. And I put myself into situations that would have terrified me normally. And I started to see fear as an illusion. Fear was part of my imagination. Everything was based on what had already happened to me or based on what could happen to me. If I looked at right here, right now, in this moment, I was okay. Nothing was happening to me. And that really helped to calm my mind up. Our mind is a weird thing because we can't cut it in half. It doesn't bleed. What is our mind really? And for a long time, I guess it protected me by numbing all these memories out. But then it still fed me fear and it still fed me shame. So I couldn't listen to my mind. I had to listen to my body, really. And that really helped once I turned my back on my mind and just thought, no, I'm not going to do fear anymore. It's like an old program on my mind Mac. I need to upgrade to the latest package. It was out of date, all these old habits and behaviors and patterns. So yeah, I broke up with fear big time.
That's amazing. So with your therapy that you went to, did you ever do any like go under, what do they call that? Hypnosis to try to bring back some of the memories, or did you just?
If you name it, I we tried it. So when I was in therapy the last time for these 3 years, and I struggled to believe what was happening, I thought I'd made it up, that I was bringing back other women's memories with me. My therapist suggested going for some therapeutic massage, which I hadn't really heard of. And the very first time I went, I lay on the massage couch and I could hear this person screaming and shouting and kicking and fighting with the therapist. And I thought, who is making all that noise? And then I realized it was coming from me. And that's when I thought, I'm a British woman. We don't like to make a fuss or to make a noise. I wouldn't behave like that. And I thought, God, that has to be coming from somewhere deep inside of me, this trauma that was held in my cells, held in my body, because the body remembers what happens, which is why we get triggered. Physiologically, we feel it, we shake, we feel sick, we get hot and cold, our heart beats. It's a physiological response. And so that then set me on a path of trying loads of other, I guess you would call alternative therapies. So I did have hypnosis many years ago to help me get over the fear of childbirth. And I did get some memories back, but then I was also concerned, how do I know those were real memories? Because, I was under hypnosis. I didn't trust my mind again. I was doing that avoidance of acceptance. And so I've tried everything. I've done about 50 sweat lodges. I've taken San Pedro, which is like plant medicine, a bit like ayahuasca. Mm-hmm. I've walked on fire. I've done transformational breath work. I've done dance therapy, drumming, loads of different stuff, cranial sacral therapy, and lots of talking therapy. But collectively, they all kind of worked, really. I guess for me, my main journey has been, even though I didn't want them, was getting my memories back and getting back into my body. Because on that night, as I said in the TEDx, I left the scene of the crime. I floated out of my body. I had an out-of-body experience because I was very close to being killed that night. And a lot of my life, I never felt back in. I never felt grounded and or whole. I was like this house that I was renting, which had no furniture, and I was an unfurnished house, so to speak. So I really did whatever I could to get grounded again and get back into my body. So a lot of that also has been through sport. So I used to run every day, but I realized I was running on empty. I wasn't in my legs, which was a shame because I was great at running long distance. But at 41, I went to karate, which terrified me, but I still go there now. Windsurfing, which I hated because I was so out of control, but I still windsurf. And I'm a weightlifter because you cannot deadlift twice your body weight unless you are in your feet, in your core, in your thighs, in your breath. So all of these things collectively have all helped me to ground me, get me back into my body, I guess, be present and accept what had happened. Because in the denial of acceptance, I was driving myself crazy. I just refused to believe this was happening. And after what I saw, it's not the pictures that is the problem here. It's I am the problem. My refusal to accept what took place that night was actually going to give my brain more issues than what the trauma did. I had the chance to drive myself crazy if I didn't stop what I was doing.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, that makes absolute sense. I know what you're talking about. And sometimes when you realize that, looking outside of yourself for the answers, or, blaming outside sources for whatever the issues are, and coming to the realization that, the common denominator in all of my problems is me. And I'm the one that's probably the problem, and it's not everybody else. And so that realization in itself is very powerful, because then you start to look to you to like, I would start to look to me before I look to anywhere else. All right, well, let me stop and see what my part in this is, because before I go and start trying to point fingers at anyone else, let me see where I'm at in this. And most of the time I found that I didn't have to go very much further than me to find what the problem was.
I just needed to get out of the way of myself. I just had to accept and stop. I was taking a battle with myself. One side, I put down my weapons of denial and refusal to accept and avoidance. And I chose acceptance, which really, where the forgiveness came in with understanding that it was so much easier. It was you. I could just let go of all, but that will, that strong will inside, refusing to accept. That was a tough one to walk through. That took a lot of time to crack. It really did.
Well, I'm glad you did, because what came out of that is amazing. And, the path and the speaking and everything else that you're doing is amazing. And you're helping a lot of people, whether you know it or not. So I want to pivot just a little bit, because you'd mentioned something towards, when you were in your path of different modalities that you were trying to get through this, and you kind of sparked something, and I was like, oh, really? I want to know a little bit more about that.
When are you going to pick up on? I can guess, but go with it.
Yeah, the ayahuasca.
You're going to ask me that.
Yeah.
I've done ayahuasca because ayahuasca renders you senseless, and because I was still very fearful of what anyone could do to me if I was completely out of control, I went for a slightly gentler one, which was still pretty hardcore, called San Pedro. Mm-hmm. And it's still a plant medicine. It's still taken by the shamans in Peru, but I did it in the Highlands of Scotland. And I've taken it maybe 5 or 6 times, and it's like a 3 to 4 day retreat. You kind of go on a fast, so you don't really eat much, and we take the plant medicine in the morning about 11, and it lasts, the feelings of it maybe for a good 8 hours, and every evening we would have a sweat lodge, which just blows it up even more. But for me, what it really did, because it would do something different for everybody, it stripped me of all my conditioning. So it just left me with what is. And when I was left with what is, I couldn't deny. And I was watching these people, because there was a group of about 10 or 15 of us. It was a group retreat. And the guys were climbing trees, swimming naked in the river, loving life. And the women were dancing. And I was curled up in this ball, crying my eyes out, traumatized. And I was like, look, it's not fair. They're enjoying life. And I'm traumatized every time. But again, I was still running from it emotionally. I was still trying to shut everything that was coming in. So it was a big pressure. And the very last time I took it, which is, I've never taken it since, I said to myself, okay, I sat by the river by myself, and I said, show me everything that happened to me. Just show me the show. And I sat as steady as I could, and I watched from the start to the end of everything they did to me. And I cried buckets with that 13-year-old girl. And then I thought, I am not my body. I'm not what they did to me. This was a crime committed against my body. It was nothing to do with me. It was just wrong place, wrong time. And if I don't accept this now, like I said, I was going to drive myself mad. So for me, the San Pedro was very tough. It's really not for the faint-hearted, but it was so powerful. It was amazing plant medicine. But yeah, it's not legal in this country. I don't know about, maybe in California it might be more legal because you have different laws to us. But it really helped me tremendously.
No, I don't think it's legal here. Anything that helps you is not legal anywhere.
And I guess kind of like people would say it's like a psychedelic drug. So also what it did, because we're out in nature up in the Highlands, you feel whether this happens or not, you feel all the vibrations. So I was cleaning the earth under my feet. I could speak to the sheep with my mind. I was talking to the trees. I just blended into nature. And at the end of the day, we really are nature. When we are all conditionings, I just became one, I guess, with my outdoor life, my indoor life. It was pretty transformative. Yeah, it was quite amazing.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of any kind of psychedelic work, especially now. I mean, it's they're starting to see, especially with psilocybin, that the magic mushrooms are very very helpful in a lot of different ways. From people that are getting ready to transition to to dying. People that are terminal, they've given it to them, and it's really calmed them into, okay, well, I'm not afraid of death anymore. It's I've taken mushrooms. I've taken them not too long ago. I've microdosed with them instead of using like, I don't know, what do they call it, like SSRIs. What would those be, like Zoloft and some of these other medicines like that. Instead of taking those, I started myself on a regimen of microdosing, which is like 0.3 of a gram of ground ups.
Third thing that we took.
Yeah.
The foulest tasting thing I've ever drunk in my life. It was just really revolting. But very quickly I felt it in my system really quickly. Normally it takes a little while for it to build up, but straight away it's just whoa. Yeah, powerful stuff.
Yeah, so I'm an advocate. Anything that's plant-based, and has a medicinal value to help us, see some of the things that we can't see. And I have one that I need to go on as well. They call it a hero dose of psilocybin. I have one sitting in my cabinet waiting to go, and when I get to a spot where I can be in nature and the time is right, I'll do it. And I can't wait because, I'm scared. It's a scary thing because you don't know what's in there. It's when I think about it, what's in my mind.
We say we don't know, but everything that came up was never a surprise. It's painful. I'm not saying it was a loss, but nothing was ever really a surprise. So we do really know. We kind of convince ourselves we don't know, but actually we always do know.
Yeah. Maybe that's what I'm afraid of, is that I know, but I just don't want to deal with it.
Right, you space it. I think, like I said, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Healing is not a linear path. It's not a straight path. It's ups and downs and all over the place. But eventually you can get to a place where you're really okay and really settled with it. I couldn't speak out about rape and sexual violence if I wasn't okay.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you. Thank you for everything that you're doing and everything that you do. We're at about 40 minutes here, so why don't you go ahead and plug your podcast, your book, anything that you want to appear in the show notes, and that's the time for this right now.
Well, my memoir is called Unbroken, and my podcast is called Unbroken, the podcast with Madeleine Black, which has just started, so obviously if you'd like to listen in, I'd be delighted. You can find me at our website, madelineblack.co.uk, and on all the social media channels as well.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you again. I can't say enough about what you're doing and the amazing amount of strength that you show and courage for sharing your story and, your strength and your weakness as well. All of that encompasses who we are, and weakness sometimes isn't weakness. It's a strength, and I think that you're a very strong and powerful woman. Your voice is amazing, and all of the things that I've watched on you so far, I've been very touched. So I want to thank you for coming on my show and sharing with the listeners your story and your strength.
Thank you so much. And if anyone is listening, I would just say it's never too late to find your voice and get support.
You've been listening to the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. Sean is a single dad, a union blue-collar guy, and he spent time in federal and state prison for drug trafficking and fraud. When he was released from prison in 2006, all he had was the clothes on his back, a bag of mail, and some paperwork. Since then, he's turned his life around and shares the struggles and successes on this podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you were moved. To connect to the show, book a guest spot. For merch, Patreon, PayPal, and social media links, go to linktr.ee/nowhere to go but up. On Instagram at nowhere to go but up now. On Twitter at but up now. On the YouTube channel at nowhere to go but up podcast. See you next time.